Welcome to Next Radio with Broadcast Bionics, innovative solutions for creative people.
Yes, I am wearing a suit. It's true. When working in the wonderful world of commercial radio, as opposed to the BBC, one learns that you need many skills. One of them might be, a little later on, selling the joys of commercial radio to Lucozade. Hence, I'm dressed like a used car salesman. Although there's a few chaps there joining me in the front row. Fantastic stuff. TalkSport, the only commercial speech radio station, national network that is, in the United Kingdom. It was born, however, it had a frantic birth. I don't know if you know the history, very, very quickly. Talk Radio UK. Don't know if anybody remembers that. Launched in 1995. By an American company called EMIS on the same frequency, 1053, 1089 AM, which used to be what? Anybody tell me? Radio 1, yes, Radio 1's old medium wave frequency, and the government decided that it would sell those all off. So what happened is the Americans came into town with huge wadges of cash and put millions of quid on the table and said, we'll like it, we'd like it. I'm not going to do an American accent because I'm shit at it, all right. And so they won the license, costing them millions before they even turned on a light bulb. And they said, we are going to bring, and you might remember this term, we are going to bring, just think of this as an American accent, we are going to bring to the United Kingdom and the listening public of Britain, shock jocks. You might remember that back in 1995. A few people still attempting it today. So at the time I was working in BBC local radio, a place called BBC CWR, Coventry and Warwickshire. And still had notions of celebrity at that point, and put me demo tape, and promptly got a job on Talk. Don't worry, this isn't going to be all about me. Don't worry, I'll move on. Talk Radio UK, and so speech radio, commercial speech radio, as a national brand was launched under Talk Radio UK, and guess what? It was shit. It was really, really bad because it was contrived. It was gratuitous. It didn't have any confidence in itself. So we'd get some American radio consultant, of which there are many, and Australians, funnily enough. I don't know what it is. But they came and talked about shock jockery. And then actually the need to shock involved really getting under the skin of people and really sort of shaking them up. For me, all it was, in my naive way, and for most of my other presenters, was saying bollocks a lot. And thinking that indeed was shocking. It wasn't. The audience didn't respond, and neither, more importantly, did the advertisers. So EMIS got out of town. They legged it. And there were lots of manifestations. Then a company called CLT UFA took it up and turned it into something else, which was like a sort of commercial version of the British Broadcasting Corporation. And that sort of didn't work either, because guess what? The BBC are really good at being the BBC. And trying to be them doesn't work, although it did give some advertisers a little bit more confidence, and the audience slowly began to build. And in 1998, Talk Radio UK, as it was then, made its first foray into sport, signing on a non-exclusive basis the World Cup in France at the time. And so sport on a commercial basis began to work. And actually, at that time, it was struggling. Sport, it was £1 million in 1 month, was turned over on the World Cup. And I don't know about you, I thought, you know what, there's something in this. There is something in this. Now, promptly, as soon as we started to make money, CLT UFA, under the Bertelsmann Group, decided to sell all their assets in the United Kingdom, which is great. And I don't know how many people here have been through sort of any takeover process whatsoever, but it can be rather nerve-wracking. I thought, well, look, it can't be all that bad. It was. A fellow called Kelvin Mackenzie and the Wireless Group bought Talk Radio UK. Now, I could bore you senseless with stories about Kelvin's machinations and his thoughts on commercial radio, but we haven't got time here. In fact, I've only got 30 minutes left. Suffice to say, it was an interesting ride. I'm only thankful to the BBC for giving me a call one day and suggesting that maybe I'd like to do what I was doing there, which was buying at that time quite successfully sports rights at BBC and, more importantly, 5 Live, which is where I found myself and had 7 fantastic years. Kelvin MacKenzie in 2000 turned and created the brand TalkSport. And that was actually a stroke of genius because it gave it focus, it gave it an intention, and it gave it a clarity. That's what it said on the tin, but that really wasn't necessarily what was executed. It was a very confused brand, which some of you might recognize. So you might have the Alan Brazil Sports Breakfast sometimes, followed by, generally, slightly sort of overweight, right of centre individual, shouting loudly into a microphone about things like immigration, followed by another sports show, followed by a current affairs show, followed by something else. It became quite a confused melee of sound, although it was proving to be slightly more successful commercially. It wasn't doing what it could do best, which was really engage an audience and make money. And in fact, it was losing money at such a rate that Kelvin was, God bless him, forced to sell, which he did to UTV Media. UTV Media is the ITV franchise in the north of Ireland who got itself into radio in Ireland and decided to get into radio here. Bought the wireless group and then inherited TalkSport, which from that point on gave it stability and has moved it on. But I think what we're sort of, this is what we do, and what we do is combine a range of rights, audience, and talent. And whatever genre of radio we're all in and all represent here today, talent, of course, is absolutely key in what we're about. An investment in the good talent who know what they're talking about and have the ability to converse with an audience. Live rights, we've invested in all that. We've dealt with all that and have, at the moment, as we speak, involved in exclusive commentary on the Rugby World Cup. And of course, then employing that talent to build around it. I'm rushing through this because I don't want this to be an advert for TalkSport. I'm just showing off slightly. We've done really, really well. An audience growth. We've built an audience past 3 million. And in 3 million in commercial terms, in national radio is a magic number. Once you break past that 3 million barrier, that's when actually you become, in some cases, a must-have. People begin to have to listen to you. They begin to have to buy from you. So it's very important that we reach that milestone. We've gone through it and surpassed it. So yeah, audience going up, etc. We won't talk about that. Digital and social media, clearly important, but I'm going to come on to that shortly. What I want to talk about, though, is TalkSport is just part of the big family. It's part of being in radio. And the one question I want to ask you as radio practitioners, in whatever, we've seen some fantastic presentations, and whatever sort of platform or genre you're involved in, is the question, why? That's what I ask my team. That's about building a brand. Why? Why are you doing it? As a producer, when you're building that item or creating that package or setting that guest up or creating that running order, why are you doing it? As a presenter behind the microphone, if you're in music and you're thinking about that link, if you're in speech and you're going to ask that question, why are you doing it? And if the answer is you don't know, then you probably shouldn't fucking be doing it. It might seem a very simple proposition, but for me, lots of radio suffers from that lack of clarity. And what we've tried to do, and I think successfully at TalkSport, is build a proposition that is very confident in itself. It knows what it is. All right? It is not sitting there, as we once were, talking about the machinations of broken Britain or highlighting the issues in and around what happens with immigration. A lot of these issues are done brilliantly by 5 Live, a BBC speech station. So why would we compete with that? So what do we want to do? Why are we doing it? Why are we doing that? Probably for the wrong reasons. Has anyone here rung a radio station? Yeah? Not too many. Not too many. I don't know, I'm lying now because I can't see any of you, but I'm just guessing, not too many. Because what really sort of I find irksome about when people talk about commercial speech radio is that immediately translates into phone-in radio. That's what you guys do. You just make the phones ring. All right? And I think for a lot of people producing commercial speech radio, certainly on a national scale with TalkSport, with Talk Radio and then became TalkSport, they felt that a success for a program and for a producer was, how many times have we heard it? Oh, the lines were red hot. They're all full. The audience ringing in. Well, they might ring in if you suggest, I don't know, Wales should be cut off and sent into the ocean and become a completely different, and run itself completely differently. It might, if you're going to say something gratuitous and stupid, the phone will ring. But just as we acknowledged here, there aren't that many people that have rung a radio station. Why then would we produce programming purely for the minority that want to react to a phone-in? Why would we do that? Shouldn't we be producing radio that people want to listen to? Sit back, be engaged by, learn something from. And I think in commercial radio for a long time, we didn't believe we could do that. That somehow was purely the domain of the British Broadcasting Corporation. And as commercial operators, we weren't equipped to do it. And I suppose our success at TalkSport has been built on, yes, a very pure, defined look at what we do as a brand. Talk about sport, very simple, do what it says on the tin. A very clear notion of who our audience is, but actually primarily building our credibility with the audience. And that means not being gratuitous, not saying things that are just purely stupid in an attempt to gain and garner some type of reaction from the listener by making them ring in so we can create cheap content. It's not about that. It's about a real focus on quality and credibility. Breaking stories. Doing stories differently. Creating sound. Old-fashioned values like, packages. Engaging music. Great talent. And I think that if you put those things together along with a very clear focus on what your brand is about and what it should be achieving, then you begin to have traction with the audience. And in TalkSport's case, what I found when I joined around about 3.5 years ago, was for me TalkSport was sort of relative success, but it always reminded me of going into a pub and there's this bloke in the corner by the fruit machine who is a good laugh. I quite like him. He's interesting. I go over, I say, how are you, mate? You all right? Have half a lager with him. Spend 10 or 15 minutes. He makes me chuckle. And you leave. And you find your real mates over here. And I think as a brand, that's where TalkSport had lost its way. It had been sort of loud, proud, but actually not necessarily believed or credible with the audience that it was trying to tackle. And I think what we've done now is say, well, we don't have to be like that. We can be human beings, not gratuitous, entertain, but be believable. And that's the one thing that, with the sports rights, the talent that we've taken on, we've built that credibility, and as a result of that, have built the audience to the point where it is today, which, as I said, is a million more listeners than we've had previously. Now, those sort of basic rules don't just appertain to speech radio. I think they appertain to every brand and every part of the industry in terms of making audio that we all work in. Is sort of asking the question, why? Why am I doing this? Who am I talking to? What is my audience? Do I know my audience? Or at least know what audience you want, and then working really hard in a focused way to go and find them. For me, we work in the most, I think, dynamic industry. I'm hugely passionate about it. Walking into, as we all do, I suppose, in our various ways, into agencies, talking about multi-platforms, the digital age, which is hugely important in establishing your brand, moving out and finding new audiences. Radio/audio, whatever you want to call it, I think is the most exciting and dynamic area of media to be in today. Why? Because I think in a world where social networking is clearly a huge element of people's lives, we're walking around with one of these and engaging in so many different ways, in so many different areas, is vitally important to what we do. Real-time human contact through radio is becoming increasingly more important. I remember talking to somebody actually in the States. We're talking about radio. We're talking about, why isn't radio dead yet? There's many articles written, wasn't there, and the very successful last set of radios last quarter about the renaissance of radio. And this guy said to me, it's just about, it's really nice, it's really cool to know that somebody is alive at the same time you are. I thought it was actually quite insightful that, that radio does that. In a very basic level, it's company. And actually what we do with our plethora of radio stations is offer all sorts of styles, all different types of company. And that speech is the best form of engaging that and eliciting that type of response. So for me, the growth area, certainly commercially, but I think right across the board with radio, will be speech. I heard a lot about music today, some really insightful thoughts about music, but the way that we consume it has changed beyond all recognition. But actually, if you look now at some of the most successful music stations, actually, a lot of their success is based on speech. I'm not telling you don't already know. If you tune in to the Chris Evans Breakfast Show, are you waiting for his next track? Or are you waiting to be entertained by a fantastic speech broadcaster? You could say the same of Chris Moyles. Same about the very best regional and local radio presenters there are that are on music radio stations. Actually, are they good communicators? Do they entertain? Do they provide that company? Are they alive at the same time everyone else is? Do people want to hear them? These types of people are driving audiences. These types of people, I think, will drive those brands moving forward, which is why I think speech is such an important part of our radio portfolio and will become increasingly so moving forward. I don't know if you got anything out of that ramble. I certainly did. These self-help groups helped me, and next time next week. But listen, thanks for listening. I'm Moz D.